Ilara wiped her hands on her faded apron as she stepped out of the small, crumbling cottage. The sun had already begun its slow descent behind the distant hills, painting the sky in streaks of gold and gray. Her village, nestled at the edge of the forest, was quiet, but not in peace. It was quiet in that uneasy way that spoke of hunger and fear. The crops had failed this year, and the villagers whispered of a curse that had settled over the land, dark and unyielding. Her mother lay weakly by the fire, her breaths shallow. Ilara had risen before dawn to bake the small loaf of bread that now rested in her hands. It was barely enough to feed her family for a day, but she knew sharing was the only way to keep hope alive in a world that seemed determined to crush it. Ilara walked along the path that led through the forest, a narrow dirt trail that twisted between ancient oaks and crooked pines. The air smelled of damp earth and moss, and shadows stretched long and strange under the fading sunlight. She had often been warned not to wander far, for the forest was said to be alive with spirits who did not welcome human trespassers. But hunger and kindness had driven her beyond caution. Halfway through the forest, she saw him. A man, hunched and ragged, sat by the roots of a massive oak. His cloak was tattered, and dirt streaked his face. He held a wooden cup in his hands, empty and splintered. At first, Ilara hesitated, her heart racing. The villagers' stories about forest spirits and beggars who were not what they seemed came unbidden to her mind. But then she saw his eyes. They were sharp, startlingly clear, even in the dim light, and they seemed to look right into her heart. "Please," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "I have not eaten in days." Ilara's hand trembled, but only slightly. She held out the bread. "Take it," she said. "It's not much, but it's all I have." The man accepted it with a quiet, almost reverent gesture. He broke the bread slowly, savoring each bite as if he had never known such a thing. Ilara watched, fascinated, as a strange light passed over his features, a softness that seemed impossible beneath his rough exterior. "Thank you," he said when he finished. "Your kindness is rare." "You don't look like anyone from our village," she said, curiosity overcoming caution. "Who are you?" The man paused. He glanced at her, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. "I am no one of importance," he said finally. "A traveler, that is all." Ilara frowned but nodded. Something in his tone told her he spoke the truth, or at least a version of it. And yet, there was a weight in his eyes, a depth that seemed older than the world itself. She had seen many travelers in her life, but never one who carried the air of both sorrow and authority. "You shouldn't stay here long," she warned gently. "The forest, it isn't kind to strangers." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Neither am I, sometimes." Despite his words, she found herself walking with him for a little while, keeping the bread between them like a fragile bridge. They spoke in quiet tones, about the weather, the hunger in the village, the rumors of the cursed forest. He listened intently, nodding here and there, asking questions that made her think he cared about the answers. As the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened across the forest floor. The birds had gone silent, and a chill crept into the air. Ilara's instincts told her it was time to return home. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "My mother, she waits." The man looked at her then, not with hunger or pleading, but with something deeper. "You have a good heart, Ilara. I hope it remains unbroken." She blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" He only smiled and shook his head. "Some things are known in ways that words cannot explain." Ilara left him there by the oak tree, feeling an odd mixture of unease and warmth. The forest seemed quieter now, almost reverent, as if it had accepted her choice. But the shadows did not disappear. Something unseen stirred among the trees, watching, waiting, as if the forest itself had taken note of the exchange between the girl and the stranger. When she reached home, her mother stirred, weakly smiling at the sight of her. "You brought something?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mother," Ilara said, placing the small loaf on the table. "It's not much, but it's enough for tonight." Her mother's eyes softened, and she reached for Ilara's hand. "You always share, even when there is nothing to give," she murmured. "That is your strength, my child." Ilara felt a warmth bloom in her chest, but it was tinged with unease. The man in the forest, something about him haunted her thoughts. His eyes, the weight of his presence, the way he had thanked her. She could not shake the feeling that he was not just any traveler. That night, she could not sleep. The forest seemed to whisper outside her window, and shadows moved where no light should reach. In her dreams, she saw the man again, standing among towering trees, the moonlight catching his eyes. He was no longer ragged, but clothed in dark flowing robes, crowned with an unseen authority that made the air around him shimmer. Ilara woke with a start, her heart racing. She told herself it was only a dream, yet the memory of his gaze lingered, heavy and real. She could not have known it, but her simple act of kindness had drawn the attention of forces far beyond her understanding. The beggar was no ordinary traveler. He was Elric, the Alpha King, walking among his people in disguise, seeking to understand their suffering and the curse that plagued his lands. Days passed, and the world seemed unchanged. Yet Ilara found herself looking toward the forest more often than she would admit. There was a pull there, invisible and persistent, that tugged at her thoughts. She worried for the stranger, though she did not know why, and wondered if she would ever see him again. Meanwhile, in the distant kingdom, Elric returned to his palace at night, but he found no comfort there. The gold and marble, the jeweled halls, and the endless corridors of power, none of it could ease the weight pressing on his shoulders. He had come to the villages to understand his people, to witness their struggles firsthand, and in doing so he had found something unexpected. Ilara, her kindness, her courage in the face of scarcity, and her unwavering spirit had touched him in a way no throne or crown ever could. And yet, he knew revealing himself was dangerous. The kingdom was rife with political enemies, and the curse that stalked the land was ancient and unforgiving. To involve her directly would put her in peril, yet he could not ignore the bond that had begun to form between them. Back in the village, the shadows in the forest began to shift. The whispering voices, soft at first, grew louder, and the rustling of leaves carried an almost sentient rhythm. Villagers who ventured too close to the woods returned with stories of glowing eyes, strange lights, and a sense of being watched. Fear grew like ivy, creeping into every home, every heart. Ilara, for all her bravery, could not ignore the unease gnawing at her. She ventured once more to the forest edge, carrying a small basket of bread. Perhaps she would see the stranger again, perhaps she would not, but the pull was irresistible. As twilight settled, she spotted him again, emerging from the shadows as if summoned. The beggar's eyes met hers, and for a moment words were unnecessary. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. "You came back," he said simply. Ilara held the basket tighter. "I was worried," she admitted. "Are you safe?" He smiled, faint and enigmatic. "Safer than some, less safe than others." His gaze swept the forest. "There are things that watch, things that remember, and they do not forget acts of kindness or acts of cruelty." Ilara's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he rose, his ragged form suddenly taller, more commanding, as if the forest itself responded to his presence. "Be cautious, Ilara. The forest does not forgive easily, and neither do some who dwell in shadows." She nodded, unease prickling her skin, yet she could not help but feel the pull of something greater than fear. Something electric, almost like destiny, weaving itself between them. As she left, the man watched her disappear into the twilight. Aelric's thoughts were heavy, and yet for the first time in years, hope stirred within him. The girl who shared her bread with a stranger, an ordinary act of kindness, had awakened something profound in him. A spark, fragile yet unyielding, that hinted at redemption, trust, and perhaps even love. But as Ilara returned to her cottage, the shadows lengthened unnaturally along the forest's edge. Unseen eyes followed her, silent and relentless. Something ancient had taken notice, something older than kings, older than curses, and it would not allow such a bond to flourish without testing it first. Ilara could not know it yet, but her life, the life of the forest, and the fate of a kingdom were all now entwined. The bread she had offered, so small and simple, had set forces in motion, forces that would challenge courage, trust, and the heart itself. And somewhere deep in the woods, where the shadows gathered thick and dark, a low, almost imperceptible growl echoed, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. The forest, alive and restless, had begun its silent reckoning. Ilara climbed the worn steps to her cottage door, closing it behind her, unaware that the man she had fed had already begun shaping the destiny of kings and mortals alike. The night fell, quiet yet heavy, and the world seemed poised on the edge of something ancient and beautiful, terrifying and true. The village awoke under a gray sky, clouds heavy and low, pressing down as if warning the people of what was to come. Ilara moved quietly through the streets, the small basket of bread still resting against her hip. Her mind lingered on the stranger in the forest, the beggar whose eyes had seemed older than time itself. She had tried to forget him, to focus on the chores and the small duties of her family, but the memory persisted, like a faint, insistent melody she could not silence. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the forest. Children were warned not to wander near its edge, and grown men crossed themselves when passing the shadowed trees. Crops were failing faster now, and whispers of the curse grew louder with each passing day. Yet despite the fear, there was a kind of awe in the air. People sensed that something more than mere misfortune lingered in the woods, something that watched, waited, and remembered. Ilara paused by the edge of the forest, her gaze fixed on the darkening trees. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Your kindness is your strength, my child." She knew that helping others, even the stranger she had met, was a part of who she was. And so, despite the unease that clung to her, she stepped onto the path that led deeper into the forest. The forest seemed to recognize her. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of damp earth and moss, and the leaves whispered softly in an unfamiliar rhythm. Shadows moved, stretching and bending, but they did not threaten. They seemed, instead, to acknowledge her presence. Then she saw him. He emerged from between two towering oaks, the ragged cloak he had worn days before now fluttering loosely around him. Yet something had changed. The light in his eyes was sharper, almost luminous, and the weight of his presence pressed gently on the world around him, as if the forest itself bent to his will. "You came back," he said, his voice carrying both warmth and an unfamiliar authority. I wanted to make sure you were safe," Ilara replied, holding the basket closer to herself. "The forest, it is not kind to strangers." He smiled faintly, a hint of something wistful crossing his features. "Neither am I sometimes," he said again, as if echoing the past. "Yet you do not fear me." Ilara shook her head. "I do not know why, but I feel I can trust you." The stranger's gaze softened. Trust is rare in this world, Ilara. Even more rare is someone who gives without expectation. He stepped closer, and the shadows seemed to cling to him like a cloak. You are strong, though you do not yet see it. Ilara felt a warmth in her chest, a strange mixture of admiration and unease. She did not know why, but the forest seemed alive in a way that mirrored the stranger's presence, watchful, knowing, almost sentient. They walked together along the path, the basket of bread forgotten for the moment as conversation flowed between them. The stranger spoke of distant lands, of cities with walls of stone and halls of gold, but his words were never about wealth or power. He spoke instead of people, their courage, their flaws, their suffering. Ilara listened, captivated. Each story revealed the depth of his understanding, the weight of a life lived among shadows of responsibility and duty. You speak as if you have seen the world, she said softly. Have you traveled far? I have seen much, more than most could imagine, he replied. Yet the places I have walked mean little without the people who inhabit them. Kindness, honesty. These are treasures beyond any gold or gem. Ilara's heart lifted at his words, yet a small shadow of doubt lingered. Then why wander the forest in this way? Why hide? He hesitated, eyes darkening with a thought he did not voice. Finally, he said, Sometimes, to see clearly, one must leave behind crowns and titles. To understand suffering, one must experience it firsthand. Ilara nodded slowly. I think I understand a little. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustling from deeper within the forest. Ilara froze, her heart beating fast. The stranger's gaze sharpened, scanning the shadows with a predator's intensity. Stay close to me, he said quietly. There are things here that do not forgive lightly. A low growl echoed among the trees, more felt than heard. Ilara's hands shook as she clutched his sleeve. What is it? She whispered. Spirits, remnants of those bound by old curses, he said. They guard the forest, and they do not like intruders. Not all who wander here leave unscathed. Ilara swallowed hard. Her imagination painted horrors, creatures with glowing eyes, whispers that drove people to madness. But she found that she did not feel the same fear she had felt before. Instead, she felt a curious resolve, as if the presence of the stranger, his calm and his quiet strength, shielded her from the worst of the forest's terrors. They reached a small clearing where sunlight filtered weakly through the thick canopy. The air smelled of rain yet to fall, and the silence was almost sacred. The stranger turned to her, his expression unreadable. Why do you not fear me, Ilara? He asked. I do not know, she admitted. Perhaps because you are not like the others? You care? You see people? His eyes softened, and for the first time, Ilara thought she glimpsed something almost human beneath the weight of his presence. You have a rare gift, he said. Most do not see. Most do not care enough to look beyond themselves. That is why I am drawn to you. Ilara's cheeks flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and something unspoken. She wanted to speak, to ask him more about who he really was, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded. For the next few days, Elric returned in secret, always careful to avoid the villagers' notice. Each encounter deepened their bond. He shared tales of distant lands, of the burdens of leadership, and of the loneliness that often accompanies power. She listened, offering her own stories, small victories, minor sorrows, moments of courage that seemed insignificant to the world, but monumental to her heart. Yet beneath the surface of their growing friendship, tension simmered. Elric was the Alpha King, a man whose authority and destiny stretched far beyond the forest, beyond the village, beyond the reach of ordinary lives. Ilara, though brave and kind, was a simple girl, bound by the limits of her world. Their connection, though genuine, carried risks neither fully understood. Meanwhile, the curse that had haunted the forest and the village was growing stronger. Crops withered faster, livestock fell ill, and a creeping mist began to wind through the streets at night. Villagers spoke of shadows moving where no light could reach and of strange whispers in the wind. Fear clung to the people, and yet, in their hearts, there was a flicker of hope. A hope that someone, somewhere, might break the darkness. One evening, as twilight settled over the village, Ilara ventured once more into the forest. The air was colder now, heavier, and the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches like skeletal fingers. She carried a small bundle of bread and fresh water, determined to see the stranger again, to offer what little comfort she could. He was waiting, as if he had known she would come. His form emerged from the shadows, tall and commanding. Though his clothes were still worn and ragged, his eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither spoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath. "You should not have come," he said softly. "I could not stay away," she replied. I wanted to help, and I wanted to see you." Elric studied her silently, then nodded. "Very well. Come then. There is much to show you." He led her deeper into the forest than she had ever ventured before. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisting unnaturally, and the shadows deepened. Strange lights glimmered among the leaves like fireflies, though their glow was cold and silvery. The air was thick with an energy that made her skin tingle. "This is the heart of the forest," he explained. "It is ancient, older than the kingdom, older than the mountains. And it remembers everything, acts of kindness, acts of cruelty, promises made and broken." Ilara shivered. "It feels alive." "It is," he said, "and it is watching you." Suddenly, a rustling broke the quiet. From the shadows emerged creatures, twisted forms that seemed almost human, yet warped by the curse that bound them. Their eyes glowed with a pale light, and they moved with unnatural grace. Ilara froze, but Aelric stepped forward, placing himself between her and the creatures. "Do not fear," he commanded, his voice carrying through the forest like thunder. "They cannot touch you if I am near." The creatures paused, their glowing eyes studying him. Then, as if acknowledging some unspoken authority, they receded into the shadows, disappearing without a sound. Ilara's heart raced, but she felt a strange thrill as well, a sense of awe at the man who could command the forest itself. She looked at him, truly looked, and realized that the ragged stranger she had met days ago was far more than he seemed. "You are not just a traveler," she said softly. "No," he admitted. "I am not. And yet here, in this place, I am no king. Here I am simply Elric, a man trying to understand the suffering of his people." Ilara nodded, her respect and curiosity growing. She sensed the weight he carried, the loneliness beneath his strength, and she felt a bond forming, delicate yet unbreakable. But as they turned to leave the forest, a shadow moved differently from the others. A figure cloaked in black watched them from the trees, eyes glinting with intent. The forest had acknowledged her presence, but not all that it harbored was friendly. Ilara and Elric did not notice it at first. They walked side by side, speaking quietly of hopes, fears, and the future. Yet the figure followed silently, unseen but ever present. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sky had darkened completely. Stars twinkled weakly above, pale and distant. Ilara's heart was full, yet a small seed of unease had been planted. Something was coming, something that would test her courage, her trust, and the bond she had formed with the stranger. Elric watched her carefully. "You are brave, Ilara," he said, "braver than most, but the world, even beyond this forest, is not so forgiving. The choices you make now may shape not only your fate, but the fate of many. Ilara looked at him, determination flaring in her chest. Then I will face it, she said. Whatever comes. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Good, because you may be the key to more than you realize. And somewhere in the shadows, the dark figure moved closer. A soft, almost imperceptible hiss cut through the night air, a warning, or perhaps a promise. The forest had noticed the bond between the girl and the stranger. It would not allow it to flourish without testing it. Ilara climbed the steps to her cottage, the night heavy around her. She did not yet know the depth of the dangers that awaited, nor the secrets that Elric carried. But the first threads of destiny had been woven, delicate and strong, and neither could escape their pull. The forest was alive in a way Ilara had never felt before. Shadows twisted and swayed, though no wind stirred the leaves. The air was thick with a strange, almost electric tension, and faint whispers rode the night breeze, voices that seemed to speak directly to her heart. She gripped the edge of her cloak and stepped carefully along the path, her mind filled with questions she did not know how to ask. Elric walked beside her, his posture rigid yet calm. The ragged stranger of days past now carried an aura of authority so strong it pressed gently against the world around him. His eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, and though he said little, his presence spoke volumes. Ilara could feel the weight of something greater than herself pressing down, something ancient and demanding. "The forest," she whispered. "It feels alive, and it's watching us." "It is," Elric said softly. "Every tree, every shadow, every whisper. These are not merely things of wood and wind. They are the memory of the land, the echo of those who came before. And they remember you, Ilara. They remember the kindness you have shown." Ilara's heart quickened. "They remember me?" "Yes," he replied. "And now, they test you." Before she could ask what he meant, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. At its center stood a stone pedestal, carved with runes that pulsed faintly as if alive. Around the pedestal, shadows moved like living creatures, their forms twisting in ways that made the very ground seem to shift beneath her feet. Ilara froze. "What is this place?" "This is the heart of the curse," Elric said. His voice was quiet, yet carried the weight of command. "It is here that the forest demands truth, courage, and trust. Only by facing what lies within can the darkness be lifted." Ilara swallowed hard, her hands trembling. She had faced hardship in her village, hunger and fear and sorrow, yet this was different. The shadows seemed to pulse with awareness, and though they did not attack, their presence was suffocating. "You must go forward," Elric continued. "Step onto the pedestal. The forest will respond. You must trust yourself. And me." Ilara glanced at him, uncertainty clouding her mind. "But what will happen to me?" "Fear is the first test," he said. "Courage the second. And trust is the third. If you falter, the curse will remain stronger than ever. But if you succeed—" He hesitated, the faintest shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Then we may begin to heal what has been broken for generations." Her heart raced, but she nodded. She could not explain why, but she trusted him. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to step forward. The moment her foot touched the pedestal, the world seemed to shift. Shadows surged, circling her like a living wind, whispering her fears back to her in voices both familiar and strange. Her thoughts raced. What if I fail? What if I cannot do this? What if I am not enough? Then a hand touched her shoulder. It was Elric's, steady and grounding. "I am here," he said. "Do not doubt yourself. You are stronger than you know." Ilara took a deep breath. She closed her eyes and let the warmth of his presence flow through her. She focused on the kindness she had given, on the courage she had mustered in small ways all her life, on the trust she had chosen to offer freely. And then she stepped fully onto the pedestal. A light burst forth. Silver and pure, blinding in its intensity. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing, but they could not touch her. The whispers became voices, not of fear but of recognition. She is pure. She is brave. She is the heart that the forest seeks. Elric stepped onto the pedestal beside her, his own power rising like a tide. The ragged cloak he had worn faded into dark, regal robes, his eyes glowing like moonlit fire. "Ilara," he said, voice firm yet gentle. "You have done more than any could ask. The curse, it responds to your heart, to your courage, and to the bond we share. Together, we can end this." The forest seemed to pulse with energy, shadows and light intertwining. The cursed spirits that had haunted the trees, the whispers that had chilled the village, now moved toward the pedestal. They did not attack. Instead, they circled, observing. And then, slowly, they began to dissolve into silver mist, the darkness retreating as if acknowledging the strength of the girl who had shared her bread with a stranger and the king who had walked among his people in disguise. Ilara opened her eyes, marveling at the transformation. The clearing, once dark and foreboding, now glimmered with soft light. The forest seemed to breathe, alive with gratitude and recognition. She turned to Aelric, awe and relief filling her chest. You did it," she whispered. "No," he corrected gently. "You did it. I could only guide you. Your heart, your courage, your choices. These are what broke the curse." Her cheeks flushed, a mixture of pride and disbelief. "But why me? Why did it choose me?" Aelric's expression softened. "Because you see the world with honesty and care. Because you act without thought for reward. The forest and the curse respond not to strength or power alone, but to purity of heart. And you, Ilara, have that in abundance." For a long moment they stood in silence, the forest around them calm and bright. Then Aelric took a step closer, his gaze steady and intense. "There is something I must tell you," he said. "Something I should have revealed before." Ilara felt her pulse quicken. "What is it?" "I am not merely a traveler," he admitted. "I am the Alpha King, the ruler of the kingdom beyond the hills. I walked among my people in disguise to see their suffering, to understand what the crown cannot teach." Ilara's breath caught. "The Alpha King?" she whispered. You are the man who rules the land?" He nodded, a faint shadow of sorrow in his eyes. "Yes. And I wanted to protect you, to keep you safe. To reveal myself too soon would have endangered you, and perhaps all who live here." Ilara's mind spun. All the stories, the authority, the mystery, the ragged beggar she had fed, the man who had guided her through fear and shadow. He was the king. Yet, despite the shock, she did not feel betrayal, only a deep, inexplicable understanding. "Then, all this time, you were testing me?" she asked softly. "Not testing," he said gently. "Observing, guiding, protecting, and learning. About courage, about trust, about the strength of ordinary hearts." Tears threatened to fill her eyes, though she blinked them back. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied. "Only trust what you have always known. Your heart is true, and your courage is unwavering. That is what matters." The forest shimmered around them, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended in perfection. Two hearts, one choice, and a destiny shaped by acts of kindness and courage. Yet, even in this calm, the weight of the kingdom pressed upon Aelric. The curse was broken, But he still bore the mantle of leadership, and the people would soon demand answers about their wandering king and the secrets he had kept. He looked at Alara, and in that gaze was both admiration and regret. "You must know," he said softly, "that revealing myself will not make our lives simple. The kingdom, the people, they may not understand what has passed here. They may question your place, your courage, your worth, and yet, I cannot deny what is true." Alara stepped closer, courage bolstered by the trials of the forest. "I trust you," she said firmly, "and I believe in what we have faced together. Let them question, let them doubt. What matters is what we know, what we have endured, and what we choose now." Elric's eyes glimmered with a mixture of relief and admiration. "You are remarkable," he said, "and yet, this is only the beginning. The kingdom awaits, the crown demands, and the world beyond this forest will challenge us still. Are you ready, Alara?" She nodded, unwavering. "I am ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." The forest seemed to hum in response, its ancient energy embracing them both. Shadows melted into soft silver light, the whispers of old spirits now gentle and approving. The curse was gone, but the journey was far from over. They had conquered fear, darkness, and doubt, but destiny still awaited beyond the trees. As they walked from the clearing, the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, golden and warm. Ilara's heart swelled with a mixture of triumph and anticipation. The forest behind them was calm, yet alive, as if it had recognized her courage and choice. The shadows that had once threatened now lingered softly, guardians of the bond between the girl and the king. When the village came into view, people emerged from their homes, cautious and curious. Whispers ran through the streets, of the forest, of strange lights, of a girl who had faced the shadows and returned. Elric stayed by Alara's side, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise that their bond would endure beyond fear, beyond expectation. And though the kingdom beyond awaited questions, challenges, and the weight of authority, for this moment, the girl and the king walked together as equals, bound by trust, courage, and the extraordinary power of simple kindness.